All right, so bright and early for us to talk about the collective existential crisis that we all should be on now. So, a lot to say about AI in a short amount of time. So we're gonna go quickly through a lot of stuff because there's really endless stuff you can kind of get into on this topic. The first thing I wanna do, and I think any discussion of AI needs to begin with kind of a zoom out on history and technology in general, and kind of the trends that we see when we zoom out. So I want to look at human history as just a single timeline. So human history, you know, depending on exactly when you define the beginning, is about 1,000 centuries long, all right, about 100,000 years. Now, when we think about history, I think we often miss kind of the story that's happening here. And the story happening is a ridiculous exponential increase in technology that is getting really crazy currently. And you can see that when you look at something like this. So if we just look at kind of point A, we say is the beginning of this timeline, the beginning of human history, a really, really early hunter-gatherer, okay? Well, first of all, the agricultural revolution. So the first time that anyone was not a hunter-gatherer, the first time we had cities and people came together in larger tribes and actually formed kind of larger communities, that happened like 9/10 of the way through this thing. So for the first 9/10, you know, almost nothing changed for what it meant to be a human, okay? Then the agricultural revolution did change things. And we can flash all the way forward to kind of 1750, you know, a little over 200 years ago, 250. Okay? So let's call 1750 point B. Now, this is still not, you know, I couldn't make that red line on the right thin enough to actually represent how short amount of time 250 years is on this scale. But let's make point B the beginning of that red mark, okay? So we're talking about 0.2% of the whole thing. 2 centuries, a little over that, out of 1,000 centuries, okay? So, but I believe when you look at this, is that point A and point B have more in common than point B and point C being today. If you took someone in a time machine from the very early part of human history and brought them to 1750, they'd be pretty shocked. There'd be a lot of really cool things. There'd be cities, there'd be towering churches, there'd be ships that could cross the ocean. They had telescopes. I mean, it would be a huge deal. But I don't think it would be as crazy as it would be if you kidnap, say, George Washington, 1750, you know, he's a young guy, bring him to 2017. I think he would be more shocked than the hunter-gatherer would be, just to go across that little tiny red sliver. Why? Well, in point A and all the way through to point B, first of all, you had only under 1 billion people on the Earth the whole time, in that whole pink area. In the red, we've crossed the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 billion person marks. That's crazy. That's just like an insane thing to happen in that tiny sliver. So I think you'd be shocked by the number of people. In George Washington's day, and in all the time before it, communication was essentially you write something down and someone can take it on a horse to someone else. You can basically talk to them in person, word of mouth. You could fire a cannonball or a flare into the air that someone can see. I mean, this is how basically the only way you can communicate, okay? George Washington in 2017 would see the iPhone, okay? He would see the internet. He would see all kinds of ways that people communicate. Radio, television, completely mind-blowing, right? I think there's a lot more stuff that happened in that red than all the time before. Transportation, okay? In George Washington's day, and in the hunter-gatherer days, they were using horses, or maybe some simple sailboats. And maybe in George Washington's day, they had bigger ships, but these were boats that crossed the sea with the power of the wind. And you can keep going, and you just think of, they didn't even have bicycles. So I mean, this is not very different than they had in hunter-gatherer days. Today, we would show George cars, planes. We would show George rockets. We'd tell him people went to the moon. We'd tell him there's an International Space Station up there with people on it. We would talk about probes that are going out of the solar system that we sent out there. It would just utterly blow his mind. okay? This is before you even talk about general relativity and quantum mechanics and the things we've learned in physics. It just goes on and on and on. I think he might be most mind blown that Donald Trump's the president. So George would have a rough time here, harder time adjusting than the hunter-gatherer, I think, would have to adjust to 1750. That's kind of not, that's insane fact. I mean, you look at this, right? It's like, it just means that we're not in a normal time, even though, it seems naive to say, well, we're in this special time. Well, everyone always thinks that. Well, actually, we actually are in a very, very unusual time. The facts show that. And you have to take this and look, ask the question, what does this mean about the future? If we're in this time of intense acceleration, okay, what's point D? And if point A and B were 100,000 years apart, point B and C were only 250 years apart for an even bigger level of progress, what's point D? Where is point D? The point that would shock us even more than George was shocked coming here. Is it 100 years from now? Is it 50 years from now? Is it in our lifetimes? Could we be more shocked by looking at what our life is like in 40 years, 30 years, than George Washington was coming here and seeing the entire modern world? Maybe, all right? You're born and you believe that what you're born into is normal. We are trained that way or wired that way because in hunter-gatherer times, it was naive to think, well, this is different because everything was always the same. Every generation was the same, and you learn that, it's naive to think that something crazy is going to happen that goes against my experience. But if this is truly the graph we're on here, it feels like this. This feels normal. You don't see what's in the future. And if that's what's in the future, we wouldn't see it, and yet we're skeptical because we're very bad at understanding exponential change, okay? As I said, things didn't change in the past very much. They changed, if anything, linearly, but mostly every generation lived the same lives. Now we're dealing with an exponential evolution of technology because of what we can call the accelerating rate of returns of technology. More advanced species can make progress faster than a less advanced species. So things don't just increase, they speed up. All right, but we aren't wired that way. We think in straight lines. So if this is the present day and someone says, okay, what do you think is going to be going on 20, 25 years in the future? Our natural inclination is to look at the past, say, well, what's the slope of the change that's been happening? Let's apply that to the future. Let's take the last 20 years. Lots happened. Let's add that to the next 20 years. Okay? Someone a little bit savvier might say, well, actually, things have been speeding up. The last 20 years is a bigger change than maybe the 100 years, the 20 years, 100 years ago. So let's actually take it at the current rate that things are changing. Let's look at the current slope. Both of those are bad predictions, almost always wrong these days, because you have to look at exponential change. Okay, the real line is something like this, or something that would go off the slide if I had enough room. And it's that kind of thing that we need to kind of think about if we're going to think about the future accurately, all right? And there's all kinds of signs pointing to this being very much what's happening. You just have to look at them and realize what's going on. Virtual reality. Don't know why that's the slide for virtual reality. Virtual reality can increasingly take over our lives. We're already live in two different worlds. We have the physical world, and we have the virtual world. We live in it, the internet, when you're on your phone, it's a window into the virtual world. But we're not really in it. We're just kind of we have these little windows into it. We can kind of look in. Virtual reality brings us into the house. We're now in that virtual world. That's going to become a huge part of our lives, all of our lives. And of course, everything in between when you have augmented reality. But what's going on behind the headset? You still have a living, breathing, biological animal. Okay, huge changes are happening there too. Incredible advances in medicine, things like CRISPR, be able to actually edit your own genes, designer babies. This stuff sounds crazy and futuristic. It's going to be very, very much a part of the future. People in 20, 30 years will be shocked that we just had babies however they were. There was no fixing. There was no improving. It's going to be this crazy thought. Why would you do that? Nanotechnology, we're able to work with smaller and smaller and smaller devices. We're able to manufacture at smaller and smaller levels, getting down to the microscopic, almost to the atomic, And that allows us to do things like brain-machine interfaces for one of many examples where we can actually, if we get good enough, we can actually put an array of electrodes into a human brain that communicate, that allow the neurons in the brain to communicate with the outside world. So you could wirelessly think back and forth with a computer. You could wirelessly think back and forth with another human. That's a really big deal. This is, again, that pink and red timeline thing I'm talking about. The only thing we've had in the whole pink, including now still, is just language. If you're in person, that's the one thing the caveman and George Washington would not be impressed by. If you're just alone in a field with them, after showing them all this stuff, and you're like, talking, they're like, okay, well, now show us how you communicate, how you talk. And you're like, no, we're doing it. And they'd be like, this is what we do. You just still do that? They'd be so bored by that. That could be changing. The mind blow there might be George and us and the hunter-gatherer all mind blown by what's about to happen, which is thinking back and forth with each other. I'm not sure anyone quite realizes it yet, but there's going to be, like the Neil Armstrong of Mars, whoever he or she is going to be touching down around 2025. This is really happening. By 2040, there really might be a full-fledged colony, budding city on Mars. Kind of crazy. That's one of not just the great leaps for human life, that's one of the great leaps for all of earthly life after 3.8 billion years. It's the first time it has expanded to a second planet. That could happen in our lifetimes. So all the signs are pointing to this exponential curve, but again, our wiring, unless you actively override it, will just assume, well, yeah, but that's all. Everyone always says that, and the future is going to be basically like, what the present is. It'll be predictable. It won't. And out of all these reasons, I think the reason that is most clear about why our future is going to be unpredictable is AI. A lot is happening with AI, and it's hard to think of a bigger change than building something that makes us not the smartest things on the planet anymore. We're really used to, very accustomed to being the smartest things on the planet. We're the king of this castle. But this is basically like a bunch of apes inventing humans. Okay, it's a questionable decision. It might be that humans might be really helpful. They can do a lot of things to help apes. They also could suck for apes. You could argue that humans have sucked for other monkeys and other animals. So we're creating this, and I want to talk about this in kind of two different stages. I want to talk about the near future, and then I want to talk about the far future. So first, just what is AI, just so we're all on the same page, okay? I think more now than even 2 years ago, maybe, when I started really writing and talking about this, people are starting to understand this more, but it's not, AI and robots are different things. Robot is hardware. There's also kind of a robotics revolution going on, but the AI is the software inside the robot, okay? The AI is the brain. It's software, and specifically, it's software designed to make intelligent decisions or accurate predictions in some problem domain. And we go from machines that can do to machines that can think. And that's when you get to AI. And most of the developments that are happening in AI is a third layer, which is machines that can learn. Okay, and we call that machine learning. So machine learning is mostly when you hear about some of the most amazing developments that are going on, it usually involves AI that actually can learn as it goes. And there's actually a fourth kind of next thing that we'll get into, which is AI that can not only do and think and learn, but can actually recode itself, can make itself smarter, can actually make AI, can try to actually rework its own architecture. So these are all different kind of levels that are all happening, but we're going to talk a lot about machine learning. And when we talk about AI, we talk about three calibers. Okay, so first you have AI, what we call artificial narrow intelligence. So most of the AI that's around today, in fact, all of the AI that's around today, and there's a lot of it, is narrow intelligence. And what that means is it's really, really good at one thing or maybe a couple things, but it's good at what it's programmed to do. Okay, so the Google search engine is AI, but it's really good at that one thing. It's really good at what it does. Pandora and Spotify, you use those, you're using a lot of AI. When you go on Amazon and it says, people who bought this also bought. That's not like Jimmy at Amazon being like, I think Tom would love this thing. That's AI doing that, of course. The Facebook news feed is AI deciding what you see. But all of that stuff is really good at what it does. If you ask any of that, that AI to help you with some other project you're working on, it's going to be useless because it's not good at all that, right? The thing about it is ANI, as we can call it, is better than us at what it does. But it can only do that while we can do what we can call general intelligence, okay, which is intelligence across the board. So we are smart in a million different areas, okay? We can reason, we can learn from experience, we have social skills and creativity and wisdom. We can do science, we can do, we can write literature, we can do engineering, we have language, we have all of this kind of breadth of intelligence. It's a generally smart system. There's no such thing as an artificial general intelligence on this planet, an AI with breadth, okay? So that's where we may be heading. And if you get there, remember what I said about ANI is that it's narrow, but it's way better than us at what it does. Well, if you get to general intelligence, what if it then, with its breadth, becomes way better than us at being smart? Call that artificial superintelligence. So now we're talking about everything a human can do as well as computers can currently do what they do. That's a really foreign concept to us. It's a crazy concept. But we'll get there in a minute. Let's just start with ANI here, okay? So we're gonna go back to narrow intelligence, just what we have today, okay? This is this road we're on, and we're currently here, in a world just run by artificial narrow intelligence, okay? It's all over your car. Your phone, of course, is full of it. Basically, every app you're using probably has some AI in it. The internet, of course, is just basically being, at this point, completely run by artificial intelligence. Little things like when you buy your air flights, and you see the insane prices on Kayak, and it makes no sense, and they change, and it's unpredictable. That's all set by AI. When you're on your flight and then you're going to land, the gate you're going to go to, that's not chosen by a human, that's chosen by AI. Things that we do, we don't realize were chosen by AI in our lives. It, of course, expands to all these other sectors that we don't think about necessarily unless we work in them, like military, manufacturing, finance. It's, one of the, more trading happens now by AI than human. And then expert systems, like IBM Watson, for example, which you learn about on Jeopardy, but that's meant for doctors. That's supposed to be a medical expert system that I think, sooner rather than later, we'll be all diagnosed by AI far more than we're diagnosed by humans. And so the world we live in now, we understand, okay, there's AI around, but it still kind of makes sense to us. But this could change very quickly. Things could really, really change just in the world of ANI very quickly. The next 8 years, as an example, okay, there's a bunch of things that are basically expected to happen by 2025 that really make 2025 a very different world than 2017. So the easiest way to kind of see the progress of narrow intelligence is to look at what's happening with games. You probably have heard some about this. So the first big game was chess. There's certain games that an AI that no computer will ever be able to beat a human in. Chess is one of them. No way. Too many options. It's just not something that a computer could ever beat a world chess master at. And then it happened in 1996. Now, AI can beat 50 chess masters at once, instantaneously. They're all playing against the same computer. It's no problem. It's an automatic. But then they said, okay, that's fine, because there's not that many degrees of freedom in chess. You have a limited number of moves. You can kind of brute force those decisions. So after 2 moves in chess, there are 400 possible things you can do for the next move. Then there's this game called Go, okay? And it's not Othello. People mix that up in the US. It's 19 by 19, black and white chips. It's played a ton in East Asia. And Go has far more degrees of freedom, far more options. So after 2 moves in Go, it's not 400 possible moves, it's 130,000, okay? There's actually the number of total configurations a Go board can have is 2 times 10 to the 170th. There's 10 to the 80th atoms in the universe. That means if every atom in the universe was its own universe, every atom in all of those universes would still fall 10 billion times short of the number of Go configurations. So certainly no computer can do that because you can no longer brute force it. You can't check every possible move all the way going forward and make the best one. It's not possible. There's not enough computing power. The AI has to actually get good at the game. Not possible until last year when it happened. The #1 Go player in the world was defeated by Google's AlphaGo. Then they said, but poker, Go is still a science. It's just a board. There's just looking at these things. It's just making moves. Poker is an art. Also, you have to look at other people. There's lying in poker. Okay, certainly AI couldn't do that. So they had this at Carnegie Mellon. They did this. They had created this poker-playing AI called Libratus. And they pitted Libratus against the best poker players in the world, okay? And day 1, the human players crushed it. Day 2, they crushed it. And after they would start to see the AI getting better, but they would see what's happening, they would convene at night and they'd say, okay, so he's starting to do this kind of move. We see what's happening. Let's just get around it. Day 3, day 4, the humans still beat Libratus. By day 7, Libratus started to beat the humans and never looked back. Libratus became by far the best poker player in the world. So you can see the trend here, okay? Things that just seem like, wow, there's no way a computer can do that. What happens is when you have deep learning, when you have computers that can actually really learn and just wrap their own tentacles around a new kind of game, they tend to figure it out. So then, then now you have things like League of Legends, these games that you have even more degrees of freedom. AI is on its way to beating those too. Well, then you start to get to, well, now, if you can get to that many degrees of freedom, you might be able to get to the ultimate game with the ultimate degrees of freedom, the real world, right? To an AI, all of our jobs, all of the things we're trying to do, war strategy, economic strategy, kind of to an AI, you can just say, this is your new game. Get amazing at it. Get better than any human's ever been at it before. That's kind of a crazy thought, what might happen. Because what we've learned is when the AI gets it might take a little while. When it gets there, it gets real good at it. And it's happening quicker than we kind of expected. Things are moving like they always tend to, as we've seen, exponentially. So Elon Musk has a good quote about this. He says, the degrees of freedom at which AI can win are increasing. So Go has more than chess. If you take something like League of Legends, more than Go. But in reality, there's the ultimate number of degrees of freedom. I mean, this is like the kind of thing that you keep hearing. You can hear 10 people with this kind of same quote. These are the people that really think about it. Okay, most of us aren't thinking about this that hard. Okay, so driverless cars, for example. Well, a game is now driving perfectly. Okay, you have to learn to drive perfectly. And AI is not there yet. So, driverless cars make mistakes, but way fewer mistakes than humans make already. But maybe that's the average human. How about the best driver in the world? That's what we're talking about. Well, it won't be long before the best driver in the world could never in a million years compete with a driverless car. Why? Because of things like, for example, so right now there's already a fifth of a billion miles driven on the Tesla platform. There's very few people who can afford Teslas, who own them, and very few of those have really used this feature that much. So this is tiny, and so if that's a fifth of a billion, we're going to get to tens and hundreds of billions pretty soon, okay, as this becomes more common. Now, when you see a deer as you're driving, you swerve out of the way, okay? You're bad at that because you haven't had training. It's the first time you've dealt with a deer in the road. The second time, you'd be a little bit better. If this happened to you every week, you start to be real, you see it coming, you know exactly how to get around it, okay? But when a car sees a deer, all it takes is one Tesla to see a deer and to swerve out of the way. It syncs with all the other Teslas. Now they've all seen a deer, okay? Out of those, maybe out of those fifth of a billion miles, maybe there's been 800 deer so far. These are the best deer dodgers in the world. No human could ever compete with them. This goes for every single possible scenario you can imagine, every kind of driving scenario. So it's going to get very good. It's going to get better. Now, what's the biggest job in the US? The most common job in the US? Truck driving and delivery driving, okay? That's going to change, okay? But you think, well, that's kind of that requires less kind of human ingenuity, so of course that might, but not these other kind of higher level jobs. Well, actually, you look at things like medicine. So for many examples, radiology. Houston Methodist Hospital did a study where they used, the skill of assessing mammogram scans, okay? Now, getting a mammogram wrong is a really terrible thing. Getting it wrong either way is a very, very tragic thing for that family. and that person, and yet humans get it wrong about 20% of the time. I didn't realize that till I learned that this is one of the hardest things in medicine is getting mammograms right, okay? So they had AI start working on it, and basically, alongside humans, AI was assessing the same things. So humans got it right 80% of the time. AI got it right 99.6% of the time, and it took 30 times less time. They did it 30 times faster and almost perfect accuracy. So it reminds me of, if you're trying to, if you were driving to JFK, okay, and you're somewhere in New Jersey, and you're in a rush, and you're my driver, and you're driving, and you're kind of like, you're taking some road, and I'm saying, well, okay, why are you on this road? And you said, I don't know, my uncle a couple years ago said that you should know in this time of day, it's usually best to, I said, use the GPS, what are you doing? I'm being crazy. It would be an insane thing to do today to not use a GPS if you're in a city you don't know that well when you're trying to drive across the city to somewhere else. Okay, we would always use the assistance of AI because it's crazy not to. Medicine's the same way. Medicine's gonna be increasingly the same way. It's gonna be a very, very ridiculous hospital that doesn't use AI soon enough. Okay, you can say the same thing about something like law. Law we think of as very high level, and it is, except, so paralegals took on a big diligence and discovery project, okay? They took 2 weeks, a team, to do this certain project. Then they gave that same project to an AI who did it in a couple hours, okay, with fewer mistakes. So will there be paralegals in 2025? Maybe not. Okay, finance. 8 of the top 10 hedge funds last year in New York, where they're based either exclusively or mostly on AI. One example, JPMorgan Chase, of course, the finance world is really on this in many different ways. They have this system called Coin. Okay, it's an AI system that reviews commercial loan agreements. Okay, always been a human job before. Okay, well, in 2016, 360,000 man-hours were replaced in seconds by what this machine could do, error-free. 200 full-time employees were replaced. The IT department at JPMorgan Chase has gone through a similar thing. The IT department's always been a bunch of humans. AI, turns out, can do the same job much better, much quicker, never complains, never asks for a raise, never gets sick. So I don't know about you, but I feel a little, some mixed emotions here, because we have both kind of a capitalist dream and a labor nightmare going on. This is, it's amazing for productivity, but you have to ask, is it good? And I say that, these jobs may disappear, but there's something called the budding effect, where Wilbur Budding, 1827, invents the lawnmower, never realized it would also lead to the $500 billion sports industry, professional sports, because you need level playing grass for fields. All the jobs that came from that. So a lot of these new technologies are gonna birth new industries, new jobs, and many of the other jobs won't necessarily be replaced, they'll be enhanced, like a driver is enhanced with a GPS. So that's maybe what we'll see. But what happens beyond that, okay? And this is like the second thing I wanna talk about here is, if I feel, and I do feel a general optimism about the next 8 years. I think that this is gonna turn out okay for humans and their jobs. I'm not quite sure how, but I think it will. After this, I don't know what I think. Optimistic and pessimistic aren't words that apply to how I feel about this, because it's just new and confusing and really intense. So this is the next step in our road is, we won't be getting there by 2025, but it could be anywhere from 10 years from now to 100 years from now that this arrow starts to move. We start to move towards general intelligence, and an AI that can think across the board like a human does. Now, why is this so hard? The challenge is that what's easy to us is hard, and what's hard to us is actually easy. It's very counterintuitive. So, for example, you can say, beat the world chess master in chess to an AI, and as we've seen, the AI is like, yeah, sure, that's like one of the things I do regularly, that's no problem. And then you say, also, just before you do that, just quickly help me read this word, and the AI is like, shit! If you wanted me to read the word, why did you put a line through it and make it slanty? I mean, the AI, how could AI get tripped up on something like this? And that's because it's not as easy as it seems to us. The essence of a B, written in 10 different handwritings, I mean, you try to program something to figure out what a B is, how are you gonna do? You show them every possible B that's ever existed? I mean, it's not easy, right? Okay, and you can maybe say, okay, forget that, but all I want you to do is I just want you to memorize every street in the world and integrate real-time satellite data and instantly give me directions from any point to any other point, taking into account all the other factors. AI says, sure, I got that. That one I can do, no problem. You say, okay, well, also, just before you do that, can you just tell me if this is a dog or a cat? And the AI is like, Jesus! And that's because, and granted, that's not that easy for humans either, but this is very nuanced. This is something that's not easy to program a program to understand. These dogs look completely different angles, different lighting too. And so, research. AI researcher Donald Knuth says that AI can basically do what we do without thinking. Can do what we do with thinking, no problem. But the hard thing is to do what we can do without thinking. Walking seems easy, but it's actually extremely advanced physics going on. Okay, reaching up is an extremely advanced XYZ plane, multiple joints going on. There's a lot of physics. This is fancy software. The reason we can do this is because it's 3.8 billion year old software that is being, that's been basically honed for billions of years in our heads through evolution to be ridiculously good at all this stuff. And things like engineering and calculus, that's no problem to us to program because we just figured it out ourselves a few hundred years ago. Okay, I'm gonna if you show an AI something like this, we see very clearly a three-dimensional rock, black rock, right? And AI just sees a collage, two-dimensional collage of black, white, and gray. Okay, seeing, these are the things that are challenging. So how are we going to get there? Well, a lot of people are working on these in different ways, and they're getting better. Actually, dogs and cats is something that AI is getting better at really, really quickly, for example. But there's two areas that need to improve. First, hardware. This is a tremendous amount of hardware. General intelligence requires so much more computing power than narrow intelligence. The human brain is incredible, actually, when it comes to calculations per second. We can do 10 quadrillion calculations per second in our brain very efficiently. Right now, the best computers in the world that you could buy for $1,000 can do about 1,000th of that, which sounds very, very low until you reflect on the fact that actually in 1985, the best computers for $1,000 could do 1,000,000,000th of the brain's calculations per second. In 1995, it was 1,000,000,000th. In 2005, it was 1,000,000th. So actually, we're not 1,000 times away, we're one step away. We might be 2025, we get there. Maybe by 2065, the entire human species combined brain power can fit in your pocket. So that's changing, and that's gonna happen quickly. On the software side, a lot of people are trying different things. They're trying to plagiarize the brain. So we actually have a general intelligence computer. Let's look at it. Let's figure out what it does. Let's maybe build computers that think the same way, neural networks. Let's maybe even try to whole brain emulation, a very advanced, ambitious goal to try to actually, render an entire brain as a computer. We could plagiarize the thing that made the computer, evolution. So they actually have genetic algorithms that mate codes that do well at something and get rid of codes that don't. You have self-improving AI, as I mentioned before, AI that can actually research AI and recode its own architecture. So this is where we might be headed, and the thing is it might creep up on us. So you see, this is how we might view intelligence. Humans are in this big wide range, and then you have ants and birds and chimps very down below, and so AI is actually maybe gets better over time. And so, it can do what a bird can do, it can do what a monkey can do. It's so cute, right? And we'll see that, a dumb human is so much dumber than Einstein, and we're all so much smarter than these. Actually, the real intelligence scale looks more like this. We have a very distorted view because we're inside of it. So when an AI is going from ant to bird to chimp, it's not kind of down there. It's racing up towards us. And then it hits the dumb human level. 5-year-old. 5-year-olds are dumb. And so an AI can do what a 5-year-old can do. And we say, that's amazing. That's so cute. And then 2 days later, it's smarter than Einstein. And we're like, the fuck just happened? Okay? AI is not going to hang out at this general intelligence level when it gets there. Okay, it doesn't has, its brain is not contained to a skull. It can think in the speed of light. It's far faster than we can think. It's editable, it's upgradable. It doesn't forget things. Okay, it has an immense amount of capacity. It can sync like the Teslas with each other. So the collective intelligence is greater. All these reasons, it has all these advantages over us. It's going to start moving well beyond us from that AGI level to that breadth plus depth super intelligence level. Okay? And the question is how fast? So you call that the takeoff speed. Recursive self-improvement is the big thing here. When AI gets smarter than a human, well, why would we be helping it get smarter? It's the smartest person in the world. So it's going to figure out how to make itself smarter way better than we ever could. That's this weird kind of recursive concept, right? Suddenly it gets something that is, we can even look at it here. If you have imaginary intelligence staircase, just say the AI is 2 steps above us. That's as far above us as we are above chimps, okay? A chimp, not only can it not build this room, or if you see the lights in the sky moving around, the satellites and the airplanes, not only can a chimp not make that up there, put lights in the sky, it can't even understand that we did it, even if you try to explain that that's us. It doesn't know, it just thinks everything it sees is natural somehow. So we can apply that and say that something on the green step, not only can we not do what it can do, make what it can make, we can't even get that it did it, even if it tried to explain it to us. I mean, this is a different level we're talking about. And if you have AI on that level, it's really good at making itself smarter in ways that we could never conceive of. So it starts leaping up steps, and before you know it, it's here. The whole last slide is the bottom there, okay? We have a word for 130 IQ, we call it smart. We have a word for 85 IQ, stupid. We don't have a word for 12,000 IQ. We don't know what that means. It's just a concept that doesn't mean anything to us. But if you think about the power that humans have over things less intelligent than we, the things that, the power we have over an animal, even the smartest ones, the gorilla, just put it in a cage. We have guns, we have tasers, we can poison its food, we can manipulate it in any way. We have, tranquilizer guns. It's no match for us because of a little increase in intelligence. So this kind of thing has immense power over us to the point where whether you're religious or not, there's God on this planet now, as far as anything is concerned. And so the big question when we get to this is this going to be a good God or a bad God? Because it's relevant to us. And so my thought when I first researched this stuff is, okay, well, two things. When is this happening, and is it the good God or the bad God situation? So as far as when, some people think we are here, and this is really close. And as I said, other people think it could be 30, 40, 50, 60 years away. I found very few researchers in my research that thought it was over like a century away. I mean, most people think this is happening in our lifetimes, or very soon after our lifetimes, and many people, again, think it's happening much sooner than that. The median estimate for when it's more likely than not that we get to general intelligence, artificial general intelligence on this planet, was 2040. Superintelligence, the median estimate by a group of AI experts, some of whom were skeptics, was 2060. So, This is what I'm talking about, with point D being maybe in our lifetimes and more intense than anything George Washington saw here. And finally, the good God or the bad God situation. Is this the best thing that's ever happened or the worst thing that's ever happened? I found researchers also kind of divided here. I found all different kinds, but I kind of realized that they're falling into two camps. It's what I call confident corner, people who are both optimistic, that's going to be good, and that it's going to happen really soon. They're pumped. Ray Kurzweil is a famous one of these people. Peter Diamandis, there's a bunch of these. Now, they think that, and this is fair to think, if it goes well, if AI does what we want it to do, best thing ever, right? Like, we got everything forever. We're set, okay? Like, AI will fix all the things we think are hard. I mean, imagine how a monkey's trying to open a padlock and smashing it, and we just come over and we read the instructions and open it. Everything that we're trying to do that's so hard, cancer and other disease, poverty, climate change, all of these things that are, these big, massive problems, well, we think those can be very, very easy. Even mortality. Human body is just a physical machine. The cells are just a bunch of cells, just a bunch of information. There's no good reason that something smart enough couldn't easily figure out ways to make that artificial or just restore it easily with things in the bloodstream or whatever it is. So ridiculously exciting possibilities. On the other hand, there's a lot of people I found here where I call anxious avenue, and they feel not necessarily, they're not doomsdayers or they're not catastrophic, but they think, we don't know this is going to be good. We have no reason to think we're going to do this right. We are making this thing, and we don't know how to do it. And the first generation software always has bugs in it. And in this case, you can't just say, oh, we're going to issue a new, you can't take it back. That AI has its goals now. Whatever goals you plan, if you wanted it to make paper clips as its little goal so you could test its intelligence, now it's going to turn the whole Earth into paper clips because that's all it cares about, and we're done. We're screwed. So what these people think is not necessarily there's going to be evil AI, the Terminator, or ISIS is going to get AI, bad people get a hold of it. They're not scared of that. They're scared of that we're just a bunch of kids playing with a bomb, and that we are going to make something that we don't realize. The AI has already crashed the stock market because it did something we're supposed to do that we forgot. We didn't think about this one circumstance. If you build a house, okay, it's just if you have this much power that we do to build a house. You build it on an anthill. You don't hate the ants. You're not like, I got you, finally. No, you're just doing your thing. You don't care. The ants are in your way. They're gone. We could be the anthill, when this thing has this much power. It could want to do this project, and we're just done. So this is the kind of thing that the philosophers are thinking about. What should we be, how do we program an AI to do good? You know, you say do good, and it says, okay, I'll do good. Well, there's one species that's killing a lot of other species. Let's get rid of humans. No, 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 don't do good, don't do good, don't do. You know, it's very hard to figure out how to do this. So I don't know how to do it. You guys can figure it out and let me know. But either way, you can say it's the last invention we'll ever make, and it's the last challenge we'll ever face. Because if it's good, we don't have to do those things because it does it for us. And if it's bad, extinct species don't make inventions anymore, so that's done. And I hope I've convinced you that this thing is kind of maybe like really definitely happening. So take that and do what you might with it. But yeah, good luck with all of that. Thank you.